26th of November. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is the second test for the November 26th, Tuesday the 26th Council meeting being held in Blayney, Shire at the Community Centre. 1, 2, 3, 4. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the November Blayney Shire Council meeting, with the time being 6 p.m. This council meeting is being live streamed and recorded. By speaking at the council meeting, you agree to being live streamed and recorded. Please ensure that if and when you speak at this council meeting, that you ensure you are respectful to others and use appropriate language at all times. Blayney Shire Council accepts no liability for any defamatory or offensive remarks or gestures made during the course of the council meeting. A recording will also be made and published on the council YouTube channel. General Manager, do we have any apologies for non-attendance?
Mr Mayor, we've got one apology for this evening, being Councillor Craig Goswich.
Thank you. Do I have a mover to accept that apology? So Councillor Price-Jones and Councillor Hutchings. Any discussion? If not, all in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. I assume that we have no applications for attendance via video link. Now to acknowledgement of country. Blayney Shire Council acknowledges that this meeting is being held on the traditional lands of the Wiradjuri people and recognise the strength, resilience and capacity of Aboriginal people in this land. Council celebrates the diversity of Aboriginal people and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters of the Blayney Shire. Disclosures of interest now, and councillors are reminded of their oath or affirmation of office made under section 233A of the Local Government Act and their obligations under the council's code of conduct to disclose and appropriately manage conflicts of interest. Mr General Manager, are there any disclosures of councillors or staff, by councillors or staff?
Through Mr Mayor, there are no disclosures of interest.
Moving on to the public forum, and do we have any speakers tonight, General Manager?
Yes, we have one speaker tonight.
So I'd like to invite Jasmine Ryan to the lectern to talk about item number 11, which is DA 2024-13, 2043 Hobbies Yards Road, Barry. Yasmin, you have about 5 minutes at max total to address the council. Thank you.
Thank you to the Mayor, GM and councillors. So I'm Jasmine Ryan, representing myself and the project, the Silo 2043, mentioned in item 11 of the agenda for DA on 2043 Hobbies Yards Road, Barry. So this project came to light out of a way to diversify our farm and maintain a set target of return on assets for ourselves. I understand that there is some variations that I have requested of the council regarding this project. So I just wanted to basically make myself available to you to see if anyone had any questions regarding this particular project.
So under the meeting code, the council meeting code 4.15, Code of Meeting Practice, councillors are permitted to ask questions of the proponent or the speaker. Do any of the councillors have questions to the proponent? Councillor Jones?
Thanks, Jasmine. I just had a question around. Obviously, this is one site for agritourism, but is the plan?
So we've got a 3-stage diversification plan. Our other 2 stages are farm related, but can also be classed as agritourism. For the record, one of them I would like to keep quite private. I am in the proceeds of stage 3, where I'm developing a commercial peony farm. I've already got 750 peonies planted, with another 2,000 on order from Tasmania next year. So that will provide cut flowers to the local community and also an additional agritourism venture. In regards to the silo, we will see how this one goes. Our main source of income is our farm, and that is what we want to remain as. We don't want to become a residential facility. There is possibly options in the future with us expanding our land holding size, that we may do a family orientated one with disability access, but at the moment that would be at least 5-8 years away, especially to see how this one performs first.
Any other questions, Councillor Newstead?
Just quickly, where did you see the silos? Because I know myself and I can't remember where. I saw 3 of them along a road somewhere and I thought, oh, they look really cool. And that's a few years ago. So did you see one somewhere, or did you?
No, I didn't actually. It sort of just popped into my head. My particular farm, although it's generationally very old, we're not blessed with some heritage buildings on it, so there's nothing that we could do up ourselves. So I thought, I was looking at the tiny house movement, and I thought, how can I make this more grain related, as that's what we do. We're a bit of the black sheep in the Blayney farming community, as we are 100% grain. So I wanted to make out a standout, but as I did some research, there are a couple around. There's the Barns of Freeling in South Australia, and they're 3 pretty big silos that were newly built. There is a glamping type one out at Mudgee called Sky Fleet Silos. A new one has just opened up at Junee. There is one at Peak Hill, and then there's one at I think it might be southern New South Wales, but it's a concrete silo within a garden setting, not actually on a working farm. And there's plenty overseas, of course, in America, Ohio, and there was one down south that was so in Victoria. It was also done up in line with a dairy shed.
Questions from the councillors? I just have one from the chair. With regard to the silo, and you just mentioned, Jasmine, that you have a grain operation, which is it's the only pure grain operation, I believe, in the Blayney Shire, with livestock and grain on some properties. But the artist's impression of the silo has the grain pretty well right up to the silo. Are you looking from a fire point of view to put some form of garden or landscaping or some sort of protection or barrier between the cropping enterprise and this silo?
Yes, of course. So we normally do have some breakage points around our cropping paddocks, and there will be native landscaping around the silo. And even though we do want that experience of the crop coming up to the silo, it is definitely forefront in our mind that accidents happen. So we will make sure that there's an appropriate barrier, there's sprinkler systems in place, and also firefighting units on farm.
That was going to be my next question, if I may, with regard to sprinkler systems. So you're actually looking at putting a sprinkler system around the silo for fire protection?
Correct.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, thank you very much, Jasmine, for council this evening.
Thank you.
Now move, there's no mayoral minute, so we'll now move to the confirmation of the minutes of the previous council meeting, which was held on the 22nd of October. Do I have a mover for the recommendation? Councillor Price-Jones, seconder. Councillor Newstead. Discussion, any issues with the minutes? Not all in favour? Against? Carried. Matters arising from the minutes. Are there any matters arising from the minutes that the councillors can see? Ask questions on? Councillor Price-Jones.
Maybe just a question around the rallies that went on in the area and how successful are
Manager, do you know?
Through Mr Mayor, we've had no specific feedback, in particular of the negative, that there were any negative feedback.
Price-Jones. Microphone.
Sorry. They advise everyone else around on the road and like on the actual track, but a lot of people in Newbridge didn't know.
Just as a suggestion before we go on, you might want to move your microphone around this side if you're looking forward, so that we can, as in it wasn't registering.
Yeah, I can't talk that side, sorry. Sorry. I'll just leave where it is. I'll leave where it is.
So, any other comments or questions from the minutes? Move on, and I will, unless there is any concern, move to item number 11, the planning matter, as the next item. So are there any concerns from councillors to move this item forward? If not, we will move to item number 11, which is, as we just heard, DA 2024-13, 2043 Hobbies Yards Road, Barry. There's a recommendation there, councillors. Do I have a mover for that recommendation? Councillor Scott and Councillor Price-Jones, I think, were the two. So, to discussion or debate or questions. Do any councillors have questions of the director or any other staff member? Councillor Price-Jones.
I'll try and talk into this. Is that working, Lauren? Sorry. Yes, no, I actually just make a comment more than anything. Obviously, the agri-tourism idea is becoming more popular, and there's been some things at higher state levels and federal levels to help that along. My concern is, or not concern, I'm very pro this development as a high quality development, but I also think from a council point of view we need to be very careful about how we assess them, and that where there's equity along the assessments. We've had another one which didn't also meet the requirements, and we sort of pushed back on that and said go back to the book. So whilst I'm all for this one, I'm conscious that we're setting precedents whenever we make a decision, and we need to be very careful about that, especially with the growing interest around agritourism. So that's my comment.
Comments or questions from any of the other councillors? I will ask a question from the Chair through the General Manager to the Director of Planning. With regard to fire, and I mentioned it before, but with regard to the water supply, and I think it's recommendation, not recommendation, number 23 and 24, or 24 and 25 with regard to fire, the conditions of consent. So it's through the General Manager to the Director, are you satisfied that that's enough and gives enough protection for this facility with regard to fire?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. A simple answer is yes. That is the standard requirement that should be applied to this type of development, so we'd be satisfied, correct. Yeah.
Any other comments or questions from any councillors with regard to this matter? If not, I'll call for a division. So if you could please raise your hands, those in favour of approval. I think it's unanimous, all 6 councillors. There's no one against, so it's carried. We'll now return to the business paper, to item number 2, which is Arts Out West Memorandum of Understanding, 25 to 2028. There's a recommendation there. Do I have a mover for that recommendation? Councillor Price-Jones and Councillor Dorset seconded that. Any discussion with regard to the 3 points of recommendation? Councillor Price-Jones?
I'm not sure that it's actually included, I didn't see it anywhere, but I just wanted to comment around the opportunity going forward. We haven't had consistent updates in the past, so maybe in this next term we could have, whatever's relevant, an update from Bradley as to, you know,
Mr Mayor, we're happy to take that on notice. I think there's only 2 meetings a year, so it's about workload and balance, but we can have that discussion, yeah.
Maybe we can see if there is a report after each meeting, which is twice a year. They would probably have some form of business paper, whether that's publicly available or not, but certainly provided councillors with a report, would be appreciated. I think Councillor Price-Jones.
with that, I didn't actually mean to make more work for the council. I actually thought that would be Bradley's responsibility. There would be no work for council.
Any other discussion, comments or debate about this recommendation, item number 2? If not, all those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. To item number 3, Cadia Valley Operations, Modification 15 and Panuara Road, Panuara. There are 4 recommendations, but I am proposing a modification to number 4, which is on the screen, on the monitors that are in front of the councillors. And I'll explain why. Because the Mayor and the General Manager be involved in discussions and negotiations, but also removing the last about 8 words, that a report would come back to Council rather than actually signing an agreement, that any potential agreement would actually come back to Council. So that's the reason for the modified number 4, which is appearing on the screen there as highlighted. So do I have a mover with the amended one? Councillor Scott, a seconder, Councillor Hutchings. So discussion or debate on this recommendation. Instead?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Just maybe through you to the General Manager or the Director. So if it's approved by the Department of Planning and then it looks like it's going to put us out of pocket and we say no, what happens?
Manager?
Through you, Mr Mayor, the company needs a road opening. Firstly, they need our consent on the Roads Act to actually close parts of the road, and then to also realign and reopen that new road. Council actually has to take that on. So we do have the ability under the Roads Act to ensure that we have input into that process.
Just another question. So where is the new part of, or where's the Penuara Road?
General Manager again.
Mr Mayor, so the realignment of Katie Road is still being, or the proposed, and at this stage it is proposed, it's still being determined, but it is in the diagram 1, which is on page 24. That's the impacted part of Penuara Road. That section would go further, be west, I imagine, below the current, southwest, or below the current alignment, and connects back in. At this stage, it's still being determined, which is why it's not included.
Councillor Bryce-Jones.
Just a question. So what or who, if any, landholders are actually affected by these decisions?
There are no landholders directly affected because the Newmont own the surrounding land.
The question, Councillor Newstead.
In saying that though, Mr Mayor, there will be people impacted by this because it's obviously going to make the trip to Penuara maybe a bit longer. Other than that, there will be people affected by it for sure.
I'm happy to answer unless the General Manager wants to.
Mr Mayor, I can go. So yes, there will be a slight increase potentially and a couple of second impact in longer travel times. We have flagged that as a comment in that table. And that's similar to something that's occurred out west to, I think it's, what mine was it, in the Newell. So we've spoken to Transport how they dealt with that as well. So we have flagged that as an issue that needs to be addressed. It is the only B-double route in that area. So yeah, it will have an impact.
As a follow-on to that, there's also a second, I suppose, there is an EIS, going to go to government early next year, and that will potentially see a huge deviation on this current road. So it would go much further south, southwest, or around to the west, and then around to the east to link back up with Penuara Road. So no design, as yet a final design, but I have seen some artists, or I don't know if the right word is artist or engineer, sort of very rough, and it's going to substantially increase the distance if that EIS, when that's actually put out, because the southern, or tailings dam X, I think they call it, which is an extension of the southern tailings dam, is implemented. If that EIS is approved, they're going to have to go right around and come back, and there has been a fair bit of discussion or comment from local, particularly livestock, carrying livestock. It adds to the cost of cartage, etc. But we're not talking about that tonight. We're only talking about small diversions in this first stage, and then next year, I believe, possibly about March, that EIS will come out as it's called CCOP, Cadia Continuing Operations. So we'll wait and see on that one, and we'll probably also come back to council to discuss the full closure of that road and the realignment of that road about tonight. I'm just more highlighting that the locals are very concerned about that large extra distance travelling if this is put up for discussion down the track, and some locals have actually asked for compensation, or if it takes place. So, but that's not up to council, that's up to Newmont and the local farmers to negotiate. Other questions? Councillor Bryce-Jones.
Just one question around the asset value. It says that there'll be a change at the 30th of June 2025, and there'll be a revaluation of some sort, and there's yet to be an updated figure, but do we have a ball figure? What we're thinking, and how much of impacts they're going to have on our accounts?
Manager.
Through Mr And no, we don't know that. We're going through asset transport revaluation now, so we won't know that till a lot closer to June.
Likely to be good or bad?
Other comments or questions from the councillors? If not, I'll just make a quick comment. It's important to note the valuation between the land value and the asset value of over $10.5 million, and that would come onto our books if the road was to be realigned. It sounds potentially wonderful that like for like, or they provide a new route. The problem is that it's this particular asset, as in that road where it goes through that pathway, that's what's on our books. So we would have to write that road off, and that potentially could have a $10.5 million impact on our profit and loss account if that was to take place. So it's something that the council is trying to avoid, and if you read the report, as in part of the report is to have a neutral impact on our bottom line. So that's important to consider. And again, in the negotiations with Newmont, that would, it's already, I believe, been highlighted, General Manager.
Yeah, through Mr. Mayor, I probably need to add, so we have, since December last year when our submission went in on the planning application, we've been ongoing conversations with Newmont and working proactively together to get the right outcome. It was run in the Central Western Daily today about it. I think that was a lopsided story. That both the company and council have been working together on the premise that there'll be no financial impact. So and it's taken us, because it is so complicated with our asset valuations, to accurately work out what is the impact to ensure that we are close to the mark, because we're talking substantial money. So.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? If not, all in favour of the 4 recommendations? Aye. Against? Carried. Item number 4, report of council investments as at the 31st of October 2024. There are 2 parts to the recommendation. Do I have a mover? Councillor Newstead and Councillor Dorset. So any comment with regard to this report? If not, all those... sorry, Councillor Scott.
Could I just have it clarified what works were required via the...
It's the next report. That's the QBRS. So we can come to that question in a minute. Any questions on the investment, council investments, which by the looks of it are quite healthy still at over $35 million, just scrolling to the right place. So yeah, $35.192 million at this point in time at the end of October. So yeah, it's nice to be in a reasonably healthy position. Any other comments or questions before I go to the vote? If not, all those in favour of the 2 recommendations? Aye. Against? Carried. To item number 5, the quarterly budget review statement, September 2024. 2 recommendations. Do I have a mover for the recommendations? No. Councillor Newstead has moved that way. Councillor Dorset has seconded that. Questions or comments from the councillors? Councillor Scott.
Now that we're on the right one. If I could just get some clarification regarding 2 matters in the operational expenditure. Just if regarding the compliance work needed at the waste facility, and also the 60,000 regarding the election costs.
Mr. Mayor, I'd say the first one would go to the Director of Planning.
The main operational matters which we are addressing following, I suppose, discussions may relate to some additional work in relation to so we anticipate in some of the correspondences back to the EPA, which we still await to hear their final reply, but the consultancy environmental reporting types of things which they had flagged with us.
Through you, Mr Mayor, with regards to the additional $60,000 for council, this budget was, as the report indicates, was provided for in 25-26. It was effectively an oversight. It was based on the time lag in the past with invoicing for election costs. However, given the timing of the election being in September, we anticipate we should receive the invoice before June, and therefore we wanted to just cover our bases this financial year.
I'll just ask a follow-on question then before I ask for more questions from the councillors. So the 60,000 that's been allocated, do you believe that is sufficient, or have we any actual indication from the Electoral Commission of what they're going to bill us?
So, through Mr Mayor, Council received an estimate or quotation in June of 2023. It was in the order of $72,000. So that's where we've allowed for, well, a little bit more than that, but we've used that as a guide.
So given we've only allocated 60,000 though, so are we taking money from somewhere else to cover the extra?
Sorry, through you, Mr Mayor, an amount had already been budgeted for election expenses in the current financial year. So this was to supplement that amount funded. To give you some context, normally council would bear some preliminary costs associated with election expenses, such as accommodation and advertising. That hasn't eventuated this time. It appears that will be invoiced in one lump sum, whereas in the past council would be responsible for all advertising costs, and therefore that's why we've always had that small provision in the first year, and then the bulk of the
Questions from councillors. Councillor Newstead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Just one quick question. I see there $20,000 in legal costs related to the Section 10 declaration for the McPhillips gold mine. Is that the finish of it? Have we found out for sure? I know even with the letter that came from Plibisec with the guidance, we're still not really sure, are we, what we can do, or is that going to be the end of that money for...
The General Manager.
Through Mr Mayor, Councillor Newstead, we don't know yet. I intend to have a report back to the December council meeting once we've had our legal advice on that guidance material and options available to council.
Thank you.
Any other questions with regard to the QBRS? If not, I'll just make a couple of very broad general comments that, as in on the first quarter, it appears that the council is trading within its budgets, that there are, as in one of the positives is the amount of interest that we've received is actually higher than budgeted for the quarter, so there is a positive there. There's also a negative that looks as though depreciation, but it's yet to be finalised, may come in higher than was originally budgeted, so one may cancel the other out there. With regard to employee costs, etc., are just under 23% compared to a quarter naturally is 25%. So most of our expenditure is tracking pretty close to budget at this point in time, and most of the income is tracking pretty close to budget. I think our rate revenue is potentially 1% higher than forecast. So it's nice to have slight positives there, but very, very close to budget, so which is a real positive. And again, with the staff trying to maintain our costs within the business, being Blayney Shire Council, and keep them within budget is, our staff need to be commended, particularly the General Manager and the Directors and the staff below them. So well done in what we've actually achieved in the first quarter, and let's hope the next 3 quarters come in roughly in line with budget, if not slightly under budget when it comes to expenditure. So any other questions from the councillors before I take a vote? If not, all in favour of the recommendation? Aye. Against? Carried. Item number 6, Code of Conduct complaints for the reporting period. There is a recommendation there, and the reporting period is to the 30th of September 2024. Do I have a mover? Councillor Price-Jones and Councillor Scott. Any discussion with regard to this report? Councillor Price-Jones.
Yeah, I was interested. It was I was surprised to see this one pop up on the meeting, given that there's been no indication at all from being in the prior council, and I was a bit concerned that we haven't been given any context around that, and so I was hoping for some tonight.
General Manager.
We'll pass the question through to Director of Corporate Services.
So, through you, Mr. Mayor, as the report indicates, it relates to a code of conduct complaint that was received by council. The nature of the complaint, I'm not sure I can outline here in the meeting, other than to articulate that the complaint was received, it was assessed and closed out before being able to, without having any further action being taken. The expense involved resulted from an external assessment of the initial matter, or the initial assessment of the matter. And that's all I can really report through Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Price-Jones.
So I'm going to ask another question in relation to that. So did it relate to a councillor or did it relate to staff? And where did the complaint come from?
I think under confidentiality with regard to the Code of Conduct, I won't put that through to the Director because there is confidentiality with any Code of Conduct. So I'll rule that the question not be forwarded through to the Director on that one.
Thank you. So is there an opportunity for the current councillors to be briefed more fully about that at some point?
I'll ask the General Manager whether he's got a comment.
No, Mr. Mayor, there's not. It's confidential as per the procedures for administration of the Model Code of Conduct.
Councillor Scott.
Just one quick question. Through you, Mr. Mayor, can you confirm that the external investigation found that there was no case to answer and therefore the matter has been closed?
The General Manager to the Director.
Yes.
Through Mr. Mayor. That's correct. The matter had been externally assessed, the preliminary assessment, and it was found that there was no further action required.
Any other questions? If not, all in favour of the recommendation? Aye. Against? Carried. Item number 7, proposed fees, Blayney Library, colour photocopies. There is a recommendation in 4 parts. Do I have a mover for that recommendation? Councillor Price-Jones and Councillor Dorset. Discussion or debate about this recommendation? Councillor Price-Jones.
Thanks. Just a question. I was interested by this because I thought that we do a full list of fees. We spend quite a bit of time on it in May and June and making sure that it's approved before the end of the financial year. So I know Centrepoint's included, and I thought that all outreaching sort of council oversight businesses were included in this schedule of fees. And so then when this turned up, I was going, well, that doesn't seem in line. I haven't had a chance to go back and look at the actual fee schedule, but I was just interested in, apart from the fact that they're quite exorbitant, was my other comment.
Through the General Manager to the Director of Corporate Services, as in how, well, with Councillor Price-Jones's comment there, how are these fees comparing to other libraries and facilities in the region?
Through Mr. Mayor, it's a valid, I should just add, it's a valid concern the councillor raised. Just to give some context, this came about because of some late changes around implementation of new photocopying equipment, and that was largely from a presentation by Central West Libraries around improvements required to the library to bring the library up to the required standards. I think it's the National Library Standards, and as that was effectively planned in May, and I think it came into effect, or was the actual delivery of the equipment was July. So it was outside of our planned timeframe for putting together our schedule of fees and charges that's incorporated in our operational plan. In reference to the basis for the fees, that's, as the report indicates, it's in line with that of the Central West Libraries fee structure at Orange City Library, and I understand branches as well. So we try, with the libraries, we try to keep everything consistent. So that's the basis for that fee structure.
Thank you, Director. Any other questions? Councillor Dorset.
Thing to see that the library now has this service available, because until the new photocopier was installed, we never had the opportunity to have access to colour copies.
Any other questions or comments with regard to these fees for black and white and photo and colour photocopies and A4s and A3s? If not, all in favour of the recommendation? Aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Item number 8, minutes of the Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee, the meeting held on the 14th of November. A recommendation there. Do I have a mover? Councillor Price-Jones. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Hutchings. Debate or discussion about the minutes of the ARIC meeting? If not, a question from the Chair, if I may, through to the representative, Councillor Price-Jones. Was there anything that you noted as the council representative with regard to the ARIC meeting, and anything that you'd like to relay to council?
Yes, there was a number of things, but I was actually going to probably have a chat. It's been my first meeting. I wasn't really I'm not across protocols at the moment, really. But anyway, so one of the things that did sort of come out for me in the meeting was the matters around sorry, I'm just looking for it, outstanding audit recommendations and the length of time. Some of those items have been sitting on that list, and it became evident that within relation to WHS and some of those things, that there's sort of only one person, it's hard to get them done. And I guess my suggestion was, in that space, was that given that their direct report is our general manager, that maybe we could reassign, especially over quite a January period, some admin things to help push some of those things through.
General Manager, want to comment?
3 minutes, no.
Any other matters that you saw, Councillor Price-Jones, that you want to alert council to?
Not in this meeting, sorry.
Okay. If not, any other discussion? Those in favour of the recommendation? Aye. Against? Carried. To item 9, Infrastructure Services Monthly Report. There's a recommendation there that the report be noted. Do I have a mover? Councillor Scott and Councillor Newstead. Discussion or debate on the Infrastructure Services Monthly Report, councillors? No questions? All quiet? I had one. In the report, and the director may take this on notice because it's fairly specific within the report, partial quality failure previously identified will be monitored, so this is in the sewage network, in the sewage part of the report, with the contractor to respond if decrease in conditions is observed. I think it's supposed to be are observed. But are you aware, is there some lining or something that's been done by a current contractor that there's some concern about?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, there was some failures of some previous year relinings. We've been in discussion with the contractor that it's better to leave in situ rather than try to affect the repairs, as it's not reasonable to replace the whole section. However, we've placed the contractor on notice. If it deteriorates further, we'll have to claim under warranty, so we'll just monitor that.
Thank you, Director. Any other comments or questions on this report? If not, all in favour of accepting it? Aye. Against? Carried. To item number 10, Drainage, Hawke Street, Blayney. There are 3 points to the recommendation. Do I have a mover to that recommendation? Councillor Scott has moved that way. Secondly, Councillor Dorset. Discussion on the deferral of 2 footpaths, one in Blayney, one in Carcoar, and also culvert on Carcoar Dam Road, but also then the approval to go ahead with this project. Any questions? Councillor Newstead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. More of a comment. It seems like a good idea to get the drainage right before putting in the footpath, because it probably would have caused more problems down the track. So no, I think it's a good idea, and I agree with it. Thank you.
Any other comments with regard to this report? If not, all in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. We've already done item number 11, so we'll move to item 12, which is... my computer's not working on number 12. Oh no, I'll scroll down. As in the bookmark didn't work. Here now, yep. So item number 12, report of the Central New South Wales Joint Organisation Board meeting held on the 13th of November 2024. I'm happy to move the recommendation from the Chair. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Scott. So before I make any comments, are there any questions with regard to this report? If not, I'll make some comments and then you may have some questions out of that. So it was a valuable 2 days to actually go to the first joint organisation board meeting that I've attended and attended as mayor in this case. It was held in Sydney. The meeting was on the 13th, and then the 14th, I think it was, the joint organisation met with a number of government ministers from the Premier down. So we met with Chris Minns for a short period of time. We met with the Treasurer, and we met with a number of other ministers during the day. So invaluable to put forward our concerns as councils on issues. The Resources for Regions funding program was highlighted to a couple of ministers. There was also a joint statement signed by all of the JO members that was actually put forward with regard to funding, because I think 5 general manager of the councils received Resources for Regions funding previously, which has now been cut. So there was a fair bit of focus on that at the joint organisation. I did ask the Treasurer about co-funding roads, so going on a 50-50 split, and the Treasurer didn't discount it or dismiss it, sorry, is probably a better word, but he didn't commit to it either to actually look at whether that was a possible model to go, okay, for those resource councils, that maybe a 50-50 split funding model might be an option to actually progress particularly roadworks, but also footpaths and other infrastructure in the community. With regard to the meeting, we did have, now I stand to be corrected on his name, but Andrew McConville, who's the head of the Murray-Darling Basin Commission, had a bit of a discussion. One of the concerning points that he did raise, and I have heard this before, is in the Lachlan system, which a lot of our Shire is. Some of our Shire is in the Macquarie, but a large proportion is in the Lachlan system, which is the Ballabula, flows into the Lachlan. The rainfall and runoff would probably reduce, I think it's in the next 50 years, by between 20 and 30%, which will have an impact on Central Tablelands water with Lake Rowlands, but also with flows through the Ballabula system. So Carcoar Dam, from a recreational point of view, will probably have lower inflows with climate change. So that was part of the modelling. They are reviewing the plan at the moment, the basin plan, and councils will be able to be involved in that review. So that's a good outcome for councils. So this council here will be able to be involved with that review as well. There were a number of other issues. I'm just opening up a document that I had that I took some notes. We also heard from David Reynolds, no relation at all, from Local Government New South Wales. Look, there was some discussion with regard to review of weeds and animal pest funding, which was good. As in, again, highlighted the issues that the councils are getting more and more cost burden shifted from state government to councils with regard to control. There was also some concern that maybe animal pest control may come across to councils rather than local land services at the moment. Again, nothing finite, but there was some discussion. There is a paper out at the moment potentially looking at that, so that was discussed. Also, with regard to pig control, another issue. Puppy farming was also discussed. The Regional Housing Strategic Fund had some discussion. Also, the Emergency Services Levy, with potentially a broad-based property tax or levy. The councils have been asked to have a look at and provide information back to the state government on rateable premises. But there was one comment with regard to the 11.7%, I think it is, General Manager, the council currently pays. It's over 11%, so Director's nodding. That if the government were to transfer all of that into this rate-based process, so with regard to the Emergency Services Levy, and council was no longer to pay it, we'd actually lose that money off our rate base. So would be given, as in taken from one hand, and then people would pay it another way. So council would have no net gain if council were to lose the rate collecting for that 11.7% was what was highlighted. The Red Fleet was discussed. Changes with the Auditor General. So for those councils that haven't registered the Red Fleet in their assets register and are depreciating it, they used to get a qualified audit, but that changed this year. So for the last financial year, they no longer qualified when it came to their audit. There was also some discussion with regard to EV incentives and also some about street lights. I did ask a question on whether the joint organisation had done any analysis of solar versus essential energy, and they did say they did, but they would provide a report back to look at the difference on whether new subdivisions in particular would be cheaper and far more environmentally friendly in the long run if there was solar rather than relying on the state network of a night time. So hopefully a report will come back through the joint organisation to this council and other councils with regard to that. That's pretty well a quick summary of most of the things as well as what's in this report. I took on 2 portfolios within the joint organisation. One I believe I'll be chair of, the other I'll be one of the other councillors, and also I was, I suppose you could say, nominated, or maybe dobbed in, to actually look at the financial security, or stability, I suppose is a better word, of all the councils within the joint organisation. No other councillor wanted to put their hand up, so there are a couple of general managers that are involved with that as well. We are going to wait for, I think there's a federal government review and also a state government review, which hopefully will come out in the next few weeks, but we'll wait and see before we actually start reviewing financial stability and financial viability for the central joint organisation councils. Are there any questions on what I've just outlined to the councillors? If not, all in favour of the recommendation that's before you? Aye. Against? Carried. Just open up the business paper again because I think that's the last report, General Manager. So unless there's any other urgent business, which there don't appear to be, I will close the council meeting at 6:55 p.m. Thank you for your attendance.